Healing Half. My name is Mickey Spear, and the Healing Half is a quick show where we take less than half an hour every single week to pause, learn how to heal our own wounds, as well as learn how to help others with theirs. And man, you guys, tonight's show, it's just me, and I'm so excited to be able to talk to you again, connect with you guys. It's been a really long week since I've seen you last. So if you are watching live or as a replay, let me know in the comments. I can see them here. I would love to know that you're watching. I'm not sure exactly where the comments are for you, whether they're there, or whichever way, but feel free to tag a friend or share this episode if you feel like at the end of it said anything that you find valuable and helpful. Now, I got a couple quick announcements, but before we jump into our message and those announcements, I quickly wanted to start off with just who am I? Really quickly, my name is Mickey Spear. I am a musician, talk show host, and as you know, author of the book called My Heart Still Remembers. And my mom passed away from cancer when I was 13 years old. I spent the better part of the decade avoiding feeling anything and really pretending I was fine and keeping everybody at an arm's length away. And as I'm sure you can imagine, that didn't go great. Eventually, everything was collapsing all around me. I was crying at the drop of a hat. School was overwhelming. Volleyball was overwhelming. Life was crushing me. I was so overwhelmed that I realized something had to give, something had to change. So I finally went to the doctor, looked into it a little bit, and it turns out I just had a lot of unprocessed grief. And it kind of started as I went down that journey of making me think, man, how many other people out there are also just avoiding feeling? And the more I talk to people, the more I realize this is a problem, whether it's grief, depression, anxiety, job loss, dating woes. There's a million things that can cause us stress. And as a culture, we don't do a great job at diving in and actually allowing ourselves to process them. So that's what the Healing Half is all about. It's just taking a quick little bit to be able to pause and jump on in. So if you are here, I am so grateful. I've got a couple questions for you throughout the show tonight that I would love to hear your feedback on. But before we jump into that, a couple just super quick announcements. The first is this Wings for Widows gala that you should either consider attending. It's virtual, so anyone in the country can. Either consider attending yourself or inviting a friend. We all know widows. We all know widowers. We all know people who have been affected by that. And this is simply a fundraiser. I have the absolute privilege of playing at it, so you'll get to see me perform during the candle lighting ceremony. If you're on my email list, I've kind of sent some information already about that. If you're not on my email list, make sure you head over to mickyspear.com and get that. The link is in the comments if you do want to sign up. They also have a house party box. I think it's around $30, but it includes everything that you would need for the night, a bunch of memorabilia for Wings for Widows. And it's just a really cool organization. I've been extremely grateful to be able to partner with them multiple times. So if you want, the gala is free. It's a virtual event, but there is going to be fundraising opportunities throughout it. So you should totally come. There's going to be lots of performances, lots of great inspiring messages. So even if you're not a widow, but you have lost somebody, I think it's going to be healing. I'll be there. So I'd love to see you there. The next little thing is starting this Friday, I have a new song coming out, and I want to just play a little bit for you guys. And I'd love to hear in the comments section what your thoughts are, because it sounds so different than my last song. So before we get to the infamous platitude of, but you're so strong, which we will dismantle here in just a second, I wanted to quickly just touch base and share this song with you guys. It's called Felt the Sun. I produced it with a local producer, I guess is maybe the way to say that. And so he did the background track, and then I listened to it like 40 times over and over and over again. And as I sat in my room with these little headphones on, and I sat and I listened, eventually the melody came to me, and I was like, ba, 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 da, ba, da, ba, and I started to sing over the track. And then the next step was to add lyrics to it. So that's kind of the behind the scenes on how this song was created. So then once I ran the lyrics and the melody from him, by him, he was like, that sounds good. I then at home recorded my vocals on top of the track that he sent over. And now it comes out on Friday. And I'm going to play a little bit for you guys. It sounds like nothing else that we've ever put out together. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear it. And it's all about having fun. This show can get a little dark. It can get a little heavy with all the grief, all that stuff. So I think as summer kind of comes to an end, it's an important thing to remember the importance of sunshine and having a good time, even in the midst of hardship. So let me play just a quick minute for you of this song so you get a little preview. I was going to play it on a guitar, but as you'll see in a second, there's no way I could do it justice on a guitar. So I'm going to play it for you here. And if you want, you can Spotify pre-save it in the comments and make sure you're on my email list because you'll get it sent directly to you on all different platforms. So if you prefer Amazon or iTunes on Friday, bright and early in the morning, you'll get a nice first look email. So please make sure you're on my email list. And without further ado, here's my new song. I hope it comes through okay. Even remember. All right, so I'm going to kind of cut it there without spoiling the surprise too much. So that's my new song. I hope you guys really like it. I'm so excited to share it with you. It's a pop song. So I'm not even going to pretend it's about grief. But I think that's kind of what I hope the show and the brand and the vibe comes through is like, hopefully we can live in a world where we talk about grief and we talk about fun stuff and like the other parts of life at the same time. I think it's really easy to break everything down and try and compartmentalize it. And I think that's why so many of us have a hard time owning our hard emotions is because we don't want to be one compartment of depressing grief, right? So we sometimes like say, well, I'm not entirely on that side, so I'm just going to cut that off entirely. And that's, of course, not the truth. We know we are a nice vegetable stew of emotions, and one of them can be hard times, but also you can be grieving and still have a really nice day outside and still enjoy to work out and have a good time. So that's my hope and prayer for this really fun, upbeat song. It's kind of a new era for me. So if you know it, if you like it, make sure you tell your friends about it. I'm so excited for you guys to be able to see it. Okay, so after in the comments letting me know, what do you think? Does it sound fun? Are you excited? Let's dive into the topic of the night, which is stop saying I'm strong. Now, this is a common what we call platitude. A platitude is anything that you say to somebody in hopes to make them feel better. And if you've watched the show before, you have probably noticed that those usually don't go over super great. We mean well, but it doesn't usually land the way that we intend. And so my objective for the night is to dive into the saying, oh my gosh, but you're so strong. Or to somebody else saying, how, when they ask how are they doing, say, they're really strong. They're just doing great. They're so strong. They're so brave. So we're going to dive into that. We're going to cover the misconceptions of what strength really is, and especially within context of grief. Then we're going to talk about how do you talk to somebody face to face instead of saying you're so strong and maybe giving some background on what that actually is saying to the griever. Then we're going to say, what should you say instead? And then lastly, we're going to talk about how do we talk about strength in regards to a third party. So when somebody comes up to you and asks you about someone else, and maybe your gut reaction is to say, oh, they're doing great. They're so strong. What can we say instead? And what's kind of the background of that? So the first question that I have for you in the comments, or if you're listening as a replay or over a podcast, the first question that I just want you to ponder on is, have you heard this saying before? Or if you're brave enough, have you used this saying before? I know I certainly have. After my, grandma died, a lot of people ask like, oh, how's grandpa doing? And gut reaction is to say, oh, he's doing great. He's super strong. He's so strong. Like he's doing well. So think about that. When have you used it? Or vice versa. When have you been told that and just put a bad, sour taste in your mouth? Let me know in the comments or message me after the show. I would love to hear your answer. So the first thing that I want to talk about is kind of that misconceptions of strength. And the reason we're going to start here is because the other two, which we're talking to or about someone, kind of are built on this foundation. The biggest thing is when people talk about strength, they are unintentionally dismissing what the person is going through. And I don't even think the average cat, and I know I fall into this category, is even thinking 3 steps ahead when they say it. But unintentionally, what we are describing is strength as normal, right? Oh, they're back to normal. I saw them grocery shopping. When I stopped over, they had a smile on their face. They seemed like they were dressed, bathed. So they must be doing well. Therefore, they're strong. They're continuing on through just terrible, terrible circumstances. Sometimes strength, not only it's kind of like what they look like, but it's what they say. And this is tough, as a friend or as a third party, when somebody says they're fine, it's kind of easy to take that at face value and not really think, okay, wait a second, they just lost their child, they just lost their spouse. They're probably not fine, but they're just trying to move through that conversation because it's too vulnerable, it's too difficult for them to have in that moment. I know we've talked about this before, and I'll say it one more time. Grief is vulnerable. It's really hard to let your walls down, especially if you're not very close with someone. We talk about our target, right? Where you've got people on the outer ring that you barely know. Then you've got people in your life that are closer. They're like friends, but you're not like that close. And then, of course, you just keep moving that needle until you get to your middle group, which is the people that you trust the most in your life. Those are your 911 people that you call right away when something happens. Different levels on the target require different responses and different expectations with how vulnerable somebody is going to be. So sometimes we hear somebody say that they're doing well, and we kind of believe them, but we probably shouldn't, right? Just because they're out and about shopping or doing normal things doesn't mean they're not grieving. And I think that's the biggest misconception of strength, is that it is in lieu of grief, or that it is a reaction as grief progresses. Where in reality, what a lot of the research that I was kind of doing before the show is, it's important to think of grief and strength. In this sense, we mean strength as the ability to carry on, as parallels that run next to each other. You can be grieving and be in a terrible, terrible spot mentally and emotionally, and your heart is ripped out of your chest, and you can work, and you can go grocery shopping, and you can go out for a movie because your friend dragged you out of the house, right? One of the guests that were going to come on my show and talk about this, but she had to cancel last minute, which is totally fine, was talking to me about this. And she was saying how frustrating she was every time a friend would talk to her about being so strong. She was saying that after her husband died, she would go to work and a coworker would say, I just can't imagine what you're going through. You're so strong. I could never do that. She would go to Bible study and people would say the same thing. She would go pretty much everywhere where people kept saying like how strong she was because they saw her out and about. And she went home to her empty house, right? Her husband's gone, her kids are out of the house. She slammed the door shut after hearing it probably like 4 times throughout the morning and just sobbed. And she said, I don't want to be strong. Like, this is not like I had a choice. It's not like I had the choice to do whatever the alternative of strong is. When somebody dies, somebody that you are so foundationally connected with, you don't have another option. So when people are touting how strong you are, it's like, wait a second, I didn't choose this. Me putting my boots on in the morning is not saying that I'm not hurting when I sleep alone at night because my husband's gone. And that's the misconception of strength that we have to really, really, really be careful of, is that it's in lieu of grief, but instead it runs right alongside of it. And I would even say to call getting through the day strength is sometimes even misleading, because again, what are their options? I mean, yes, some people do slip into extremely dark, deep depression. But think about what we know about depression thus far, right? It's a mental thing, right? And so it's not like you can just tell somebody to pull themselves out of by their bootstraps and say, "Hey, stop being depressed," right? So if somebody does slip into a really, 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 really dark place after somebody in their life dies, it doesn't mean they're weak. But when we say things like, "Oh, you're so strong," we're unintentionally comparing those two groups of people, right? We're saying the one who's put on their clothes and showed up to the grocery store and at least is walking through the grocery store not sobbing, they're strong. And without even thinking it, that means we're contrasting somebody who's perhaps showing their real emotions publicly or struggling with depression. We're calling them weak. And I know we never mean that. We never mean that when we say that to somebody. But that's, again, just because we don't mean it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Culturally, that's what we're talking about here is we've got these two contrasting groups. People praise the ones that kind of hide their emotions and kind of pick up themselves and keep on going. And they assume this person, the one that can do some of those activities, is doing good. Where again, you wouldn't even see somebody in this spot because that you're probably not close enough to them for them to be vulnerable enough with you to see that. And so somebody can appear to be strong up here at the grocery store, right? And doing all that stuff. However, they could go home and they could be down here, but you would never know. So by calling somebody strong and saying, oh my gosh, you're so strong, look at you, you're praising the behavior that kind of alludes and make it looks like they're okay. So when we talk to somebody and we say that they're strong, not only does that put them in contrast with perhaps what they feel in other times. And well, geez, nobody's praising me while I'm at home sobbing. So it kind of can, makes you want to hide. But then it also, to play it out, usually people follow "you're so strong" up with "I could never do that." Like, I can never. And you have to just think that through. When you say "you're so strong," I couldn't imagine. Like, I don't think I could do it. What do you mean by that? I think that's a kind of a common thing. And I don't joke about suicide. That. Like, that's not what I mean by this next statement. But when somebody says like, I couldn't do that. It's like, would you kill yourself? Like, are you saying like you could not breathe after that moment? Because I don't think that's the case. I think we know enough about suicide now to know that there's a lot more to it than just grief. Right. And mental health is a lot more complex than I'm just going through a hard time. And so when we talk to people, it's really important that we just don't say that. Instead, and I would love to hear your comments. Again, message me, put them in the comments. Have you been told that before? How did it feel when somebody kind of talked to you? Did you feel like your pain was dismissed? Because oftentimes that's how people feel. And vice versa. When you have said it in the past, have you ever maybe caught yourself and said, oh, shoot, maybe I shouldn't have said that? Or maybe in that moment, what did you want to say instead? And you know what? Sometimes what we find ourselves wanting to say, it doesn't mean it's the best intention. We cannot separate ourselves from the culture we grew up in. One of my favorite stories is of a friend, and she did the Peace Corps out in Benin, which is a country in Western Africa. And they almost have the opposite culture when it comes to grief. She said that after somebody would lose a husband or a child, they would be in this mourning period where for days, like probably 3 to 4 days, and I know each culture is different. So for her specific area that she was in, they would be sobbing and publicly wailing. And in fact, if you weren't acting like that after grief, people were kind of like, she must not have loved her husband very much. And they were so public about their grief for those first couple days, but then they were kind of expected after 4 or 5 days of that to be done. The US, I would argue, is almost the opposite, where we have no real expectation from our culture to publicly show our grief. But we've kind of accepted culturally that it lasts a lot longer than 3 or 4 days. And I kind of just want to share that story because when we're talking to somebody who is grieving and we say, you're so strong, I really believe unintentionally that's encouraging them to not wail, to not show us that. And we are saying culturally, we want them to be better, right? We want so badly for them to heal from this grief that we subconsciously and probably unintentionally praise and encourage behavior that makes it look like they aren't grieving anymore. And that's what's really tough. Again, I'm not blaming any of us. If you have used that phrase in the past, forgive yourself. I know I certainly have. And we need to move on and let's run in the right direction forward. Because when we talk about, again, having people not be able to express something, we have to remember we're kind of bringing our bad upbringing behind us. And we probably don't even realize that we are encouraging them to not grieve. We probably aren't even realizing it, that it's easier for us to live in a world where they aren't grieving because grief is uncomfortable. Grief reminds us of our own inevitable death. Grief reminds us that people in our life are going to die and that we'll be in that spot. So maybe in a twisted way, when we praise them for being strong and kind of try and shape without intention, but of course, cultural probably would have intention, shape their grief behavior, maybe in the back of our mind, it's kind of telling ourselves, hey, when someone I really love close to me dies, maybe I'll be okay. Maybe I'll be strong like them. But if you think about that for like 0.2 seconds, we realize, wait a second, that's not how grief works. If I lost my husband or anybody close to me, I would be inconsolable. I would be so, so sad. And eventually I would have to go back to work. I would be so, so lonely. And I'd have to get groceries eventually. Right. So that's that dichotomy, right? That we don't want to think of. But again, you can do functional activities and still be decimated inside. So it's really important when we're talking one-on-one to somebody to just not praise any behavior whatsoever. I mean, perhaps you could praise them expressing themselves because I think that's a really healthy thing to do and to be a conduit for that. But anything that's proving, and I put that in quotation marks, proving that they're moving on from grief, we got to be really careful that we're not taking that at face value and saying, oh, look, they must be doing better. They must be not sad anymore. Good for them. Moving on. Instead, one great thing that we can say to them when when you are meeting with them and you see them doing relatively well, if you kind of remember a couple episodes back, we said, how are you doing today? That's a great conversation starter because today they might be having a good day. Tonight, they might be sobbing on the couch. You don't know. So just how are you doing like in this moment? It's a good thing to ask. You can also just do kind of the classic, hey, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. That really sucks. You could even follow that up if you are closer to their circle, right? I would love to stop by your house sometimes because it's probably more comfortable for them to be at their house if they were going to talk about it than in public. My gosh, I couldn't imagine being openly grieving at a Panera or something. That's so awkward. That's so vulnerable. So meet them on their turf and say, hey, I'd love to bring coffee over sometime and just chat. They might take you up on it. They might not, but that's something you could offer. You could say something like, I will be here for you, even if it takes forever. Or you could say, I'm so glad you're having a good day. If that does change, I'm one phone call away. In fact, I'll text you later this week and see how you're doing. Don't put the onus on them to reach out. So those are a couple things that you can say instead of, oh, look, you're so strong. I couldn't do it, because that doesn't actually make them feel better. It makes them think, I didn't choose this. I didn't want this. I am not choosing to be brave and strong. I am literally surviving. And that's the difference between those phrases. And then, of course, as we wrap up our half hour together, how do we address it when we are talking, again, that kind of that third party where someone comes up to you, you must be relatively close to someone on the target, and they ask, hey, how's he doing? How is she doing? So I wanted to dive into that a little bit too, because back to that perpetuating cultural problems issue, I think we unintentionally do that in that situation as well. Back to my own story. Like I said, when people ask, like, how's your grandpa doing? I don't really even know. I haven't seen him for a while, but my kind of social conversation acceptable answer was, oh, he's doing okay. I think he's doing pretty well. and just kind of left it at that. And even after I said that, that was like not that long ago. So again, forgive yourself because we all are not perfect. We're just on this growth journey together. I kind of remember pausing after I said that, and I had a bad taste in my mouth. Something in my subconscious knew that was not the right answer. So when we are talking again in kind of that thing, let's back up 3 steps and just paint the picture on exactly what is happening. Somebody is coming up to you and asking because they care. I mean, people are kind people. 99% of the time, people have really good intentions. And I firmly believe that they care about this person that you're connected with, and they want to know, how are they doing? And I'm not saying gossip or share something that the person would be uncomfortable with, but when we say any version of they're doing great, or they're hanging in there, that they appear to be doing really well, we go back to that cultural thing where we subconsciously and unintentionally are praising good behavior. I want to play out 2 situations for you, and you tell me at the grocery store which one would be more acceptable. Situation A: Barbara walks up to you and says, "Hey, I'm so sorry to hear about so and so losing them. I know you're close to him. How is he doing?" And you say, "You know what? His wife just died. So he is probably in a really, really bad spot. He's probably really lonely. I'm sure he's crying a lot and just totally overwhelmed with all the financials and all that stuff that he has to do. His best friend is gone. His homemaker is gone. His chef and all the stuff that she would do in their relationship is gone. So I'm pretty sure he's doing terribly. Thank you for asking, though." That's situation A. Probably wouldn't happen, right? But then situation B is Barbara walks up to you and says, "Hey, how's he doing?" And you say, "He's hanging in there. He's doing great. He's doing the best that he can. He's so strong. He's really just one foot in front of the other." And you part your ways. Obviously, situation B is what is socially acceptable. That's what our go-to is all the time. However, without trying to, we diminished their loss. And again, would that man be vulnerable with Barbara? Probably not. However, as I was thinking about this man, it's like, what's a better way to say that? Again, understanding that grief is a journey and that nobody is fine really, like, ever, but especially, in those first couple months, they're definitely not fine. But again, is it your place to say that? Sometimes we feel like we're airing someone else's laundry. So here's a better response. So again, instead of praising any activities that might encourage Barbara to feel better about the situation, or you to feel better about the situation, or even to uphold Bob, if that's his name's appearances to the world, in order to be more grief positive, maybe we could say something like, "I'm not entirely sure. He hasn't really shared his emotions with me. We don't really talk about it much. He is surviving, but grief hurts really bad, and they were very close. So, if you were thinking about him, you should absolutely reach out. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you or get a card from you." Again, you're not really going into details. You're simply saying, "I'm not really sure, but I know grief, and I know grief is tough. So," and then that final kicker, that one that you just drive the point home, encourage Barbara in this situation to reach out to that person. Can't hurt, right? Because if you say that he's doing really well, why would Barbara reach out? I can't really think of a reason. We all are busy. Life moves on. In my song, "My Heart Still Remembers," kind of right away, it says, "This town keeps buzzing. It looks the same. It seems like everyone's forgot your name." It basically, like, everybody's life moves on. And so subconsciously, I think we look for an excuse to think that they're okay so we can kind of check it off of our guilt box and move on with our lives. So don't give people that excuse, whether it's for you or someone else. It's okay to sit in ugliness. It's okay to admit the world is not all perfect. And that, what? If that person's in community enough with Bob to know that he lost his wife, they probably could send a card or a gift card or could reach out. That's ugly, but it's the truth. And real community is born when we sit in ugliness together and try and help each other out, not put on these masks and these false facades of, oh, he's doing great. Look, he's going grocery shopping. He must be fine, right? So that's my pedestal. I'm going to step off of it for the night and let you guys go. So hopefully, as a community, we can all just agree to not use that phrase strong anymore. Instead, come up with some other things that you think are a little bit more grief positive. And remember, as always, if you or anyone else you know is struggling, send them to my website. I'm going to post that in the comments right now. We're going to make sure we have lots of more resources coming out. Quick little update. I am in Texas. Woo, woo. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I'm going to be here until Christmas time. Then I'm back in the cities. And that's just this thing not me and my husband get to do, which is so fun. And it's such a blessing. But a couple things on the radar as far as all things Mickey Spear goes. So as you guys know, grief is my passion. Helping people are my passion. Helping you help others in grief is my passion. Creating music is my passion. So I've got a new song coming out on Friday. I've got a podcast launching. So this show is going to continue on Tuesday nights. Woo, woo, I'm not going anywhere. But if you are struggling to catch the show live, and it would be easier for you to listen on your phone or as a podcast, which is audio only, I'm going to be repurposing the episodes from this past year and a half and turning them into quick podcast episodes that people can listen to anytime. So that would be a really great one for you to pass along to friends, especially younger friends. That's kind of an avenue that they like to listen to. And then I've got a book coming out, like not just the My Heart Still Remembers book, but like a real chapter book called Grief's a Beach. And it's coming out in early 2022. I cannot wait for you to see it. Lots of stuff on the horizon. So I so appreciate you being here. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you inviting your friends into this journey and simply sharing episodes and saying, hey, join us as we learn how to heal our own wounds and how to help others with theirs. And if you hear somebody use that phrase in a respectful way, maybe talk to them afterwards and say, you know what, maybe we should say something different next time. On that note, I'm out. I hope you guys have a great night. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you from Texas next week. Bye, guys.